Please advance the slides.
Yes, will do.
Perfect. Great. So, one more, Faith, and then we're good. Thank you. The mission of the All of Us research program is to accelerate health and research and medical breakthroughs, enabling an individualized prevention, treatment, and care for all of us. The goal of the program is to help researchers understand more about why people get sick or stay healthy. By looking for patterns, researchers may learn more about what affects people's health. All of Us aims to build one of the largest, most diverse data sets of its kind for health research, with 1 million or more volunteers nationwide who will sign up to share their information over time. It is a 10-year program. The program aims to reflect the diversity of America through its participants. All people living in the US, not just citizens, are eligible to participate. It's a bilingual program with all components of the program available in English and Spanish, and additional languages will be added in the future. All of Us will be a resource for many studies and is a cornerstone of the Precision Medicine Initiative, which looks at a person through the lens of the environment, lifestyle, and biology. Through a greater understanding of why people get sick or stay healthy, researchers hope to discover better tests to see if people are sick or are at risk of getting sick, better mobile apps to encourage healthy habits, and better medicine or information about how much of a medicine is right for each person. There are 3 ways to join or learn more. Visit the All of Us website at joinallofus.org/NLM for English or joinallofus.org/BNM for Spanish. Download the All of Us app or through an affiliated healthcare provider organization. Next slide, please. Great. If you are new to precision medicine, it's one way that researchers are looking to advance serving the public health needs of all people. Precision medicine is a new approach to improving health, treating disease, and finding cures. It acknowledges that each person is unique, our genes, our environment, our lifestyles, our behaviors, and that the interaction of these factors greatly impacts our health. These unique variables also mean that a medical treatment that works for one person might not work for another. So rather than using a one-size-fits-all approach, precision medicine aims to deliver the right treatment for the right person at the right time and keep people healthy longer. Precision medicine can produce more accurate diagnoses, earlier detection, and better prevention strategies and treatment choices. Precision medicine is a radical shift in how each of us can receive the best care possible based on our unique makeup. Next slide, please. Thank you. We already use precision medicine in some ways, such as eyeglass prescriptions. Eye doctors can tell us exactly which lenses will work best for us, but when we visit our regular doctor, they may be more likely to prescribe treatment or prevention in a way that works well for most people. But everyone's needs are not the same. All of Us is building a large national database to help researchers eliminate one-size-fits-all medicine, but they do need volunteers from all walks of life to advance this work. Our role at the NNLM All of Us National Program is not to recruit, but to coordinate activities that raise awareness of All of Us. This way, more people can learn about the program and can make their own decision whether to participate. Next slide, please. So to review, the mission of the All of Us research program is to accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs, enabling individualized prevention, treatment, and care for all of us. The goal of the program is to help researchers understand more about why people get sick or stay healthy. By looking for patterns, researchers may learn more about what affects people's health. More information about All of Us can be found at joinallofus.org/NLM. And thank you so much for letting me have this moment. I will turn it back over to Faith.
Thank you so much for that, Kirsten. So what you can expect to hear today. In today's presentation, we will discuss what is a birth worker, what are the experience of a birth worker and their client, how can working with a birth worker serve as a complement to hospital medicine or care, how is community medicine tied to social justice and equity. And now I'd like to introduce today's featured speakers. We have Tay Amari Little and Destiny Price. Tay is a conjure woman, baby retriever and esoteric birth worker, diviner and artist, and unveiled divine technologies. She works with her spirits and that of her clients to provide prenatal spiritual security for spirits of unborn babies, a range of divination systems, various other lineage services, custom sacred artifacts and products and articles, Tal Smith Arts events, Tay in the Water podcast, and other spirit led projects. UDT's birthwork practice serves as a center for Black, queer, trans, and gender expansive birth givers to safely deepen their connection to their lineages and spiritual capacities. Using shamanic technologies inherited from her people, this is offered through a variety of birthkeeping security measures, including monthly collection of services, circles, and trainings. Accompanying Tay today is her client, Destiny Price. Destiny was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and grew up in the metro Detroit area. Destiny plants themselves in many spaces as an artist, a poet, a plant enthusiast, a youth advocate guide, and an executive of a nonprofit organization. They are 23 years old, graduated from Wayne State University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, as an aim to invest in educating themselves in one of the largest institutions that negatively impact youth and youth life's trajectory. Now, as a new parent, Destiny continues to invest in advocacy work and investing their time and energy into their daughter. Thank you, Tay and Destiny, for joining us today, and I will stop sharing and turn everything over to you.
Okay, perfect. Can everyone hear and see me okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. Yes, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, perfect. So I want us to first start with exploring this question of what have your experiences been like with Western medical institutions. Just to bring up, just to start this conversation, see where different people are relating to this topic before we get deeper into the presentation. So I believe you can contribute to the chat, and then Faith and some of the other moderators will be able to read them out loud. Cold, I see, someone says. Clinical, transactional. Okay, I know I said the moderators was gonna read it, but I didn't know I would be able to see it.
I know. Thank you. I'm glad. Go ahead. If you feel comfortable, take it.
I'm new to this WebEx. I'm a Zoom girl, apparently. Rushed when I ask questions. Yep, they're dismissed. Yes, that's common. Dismissive. Biased against those who are overweight. Yes, that's so true. Fat phobia is so ingrained in our current medical institutions. Stressful. Can we get a couple more? Those are really good. Unheard, condescending, antiseptic, traumatic. Yeah, notice how there's so many negative experiences. Not focused on a holistic systems approach. Yes, there's just so many, traumatic experiences that can be a part of these institutions. Thank y'all for sharing that. And I'm also sorry to hear about all of those negative experiences that you all have been going through or have had with these Western medical institutions. I wanted to start off with that. Okay, someone said I've had mostly positive experiences, and then I did see the rest of the message because it went really fast. But that's good too, that you've been able to have positive experiences. It's good to hear about some different balanced experiences as well. But I just want to pay attention to how many people have also talked about them being a little bit more on the negative side too. But so we're going to talk some more about this actually. So let's first get into this. Okay, so again, welcome to Health in Focus, the Black Birth Workers edition. Okay, so to introduce myself, my name is Taylor Amari Little, but if you're seeking to refer to me on a first name basis, then I am Tay. So that's Tay. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. I run and operate Unveiled Divine Technologies, which I'll get to tell you about again in just a moment. I am a conjure woman, which is basically reference to the fact that I work with spirits for a living, and primarily based out of the Hoodoo and Islamic traditions. But this title is specifically in relation to my Hoodoo practice. And some of my some of my titles are also diviner, baby retriever, and birth keeper. I'm also an artist. In terms of titles in relation to my birth work in particular, what is appropriate to refer to me as is a conjure woman. You can say a conjure woman with a specialty in prenatal spiritual security, but that's a long way of saying it. So you could also just say conjure woman, a baby retriever, an esoteric birth worker, or esoteric birth keeper. So, Unveiled Divine Technologies is a business that I have primarily rooted in Hoodoo and Islam that is meant to be providing support for the community and esoteric classes of Black, queer, trans, and gender expansive beings. We offer a lot of different services from divination systems, prenatal spiritual security, cultural research and lineage support, matrimonial services, talisman art, and other art products and things like that. Amari blankets, which are handmade prayer blankets, and also speaking engagements like how we are today. Okay, so what is a Black birth worker? What is a Black birth worker? A Black birth worker is a Black person who provides support, assistance, or in some other form facilitation that relates to the process of birthing. However, contrary to how it might sound, being a Black birth worker is even more than that. It's not just about, oh, we all just happen to be Black. Being Black is something that is so beautiful, but not only that, how it can look like, despite us being able to have different titles, different job duties, oftentimes because of us being united by Blackness and influenced by that, we still share like these commonalities, and that is being influenced by our Africanisms. Africanism is a word that is a reference to the traits and aspects that are undoubtedly characteristically African, being in connection to our indigenous African heritage. It's something that guides us even when we don't even realize it. And so, for example, across the diaspora, we can oftentimes see the incorporation of plant parts in our practice, such as roots, leaves, flowers in their work. So thinking about different forms of herbalism, thinking about hair braiding that can take place. That's like a pretty common practice in the Black birthworking community, involving prayer in some capacity. Thinking about animism, which is a pretty general term in reference to the belief in spirits and everything, essentially, from animate beings to inanimate objects. Everything has a spirit. All ATRs share this belief, and we have whole cosmologies that expand on it even more. And also, we're united by the Africanism of healing through food. That's something that you can especially learn a lot from through Divine Bailey Nicholas and her business and projects and classes, which is Divine Birth Wisdom, and she has different courses for Black people, people interested, but especially for Black people specializing in Southern Hoodoo midwifery, or granny midwifery, as we historically have called it as well, and talking about food in relation to postpartum healing in our traditions. And so Black birth workers, it's something that's huge, and it's something that despite how different we might look, we could look, we're still united by our Africanisms at the end of the day. And it's something that is so beautiful that no one can take away from us. So now what do I do specifically? So you might have heard the term prenatal spiritual security that was heard before. And so Unveiled Divine Technologies birth work is strictly prenatal spiritual security and support. Using shamanic technologies indigenous to my people, I work both with and for spirits of the unborn as they are in the spiritual realm, as they're coming down into the womb, and then birth if that is desired by the baby, and also like by the person who will be carrying them, but especially by the baby. So through pre-pregnancy and pregnancy arsenals, a la carte arsenals, and virtual circles, I offer a collection of monthly services to make sure that babies are kept in protection and in alignment to their destinies, and that the parents involved in bringing them down are strongly reacquainted with their own ancestors and spirits so that they can strengthen and maintain their lineages. So there's a lot of work that goes to a lot of direct work with the spirits of the unborn babies. But again, as I just said, also a lot of work that goes to different meetings with the parents, like the carrying parent of the baby or the spiritualist who is working with this baby, making sure that they are strengthening their ties to their lineages. They're learning more about how do I work with spirits? What even is that? Like, they might know sometimes, like, I feel like I should be, learning more about this, but I'm not really sure where to start. Oftentimes people who have those urges are really just being led by their ancestors, because their ancestors usually want to be able to pass certain things on to them. And so it's really helpful in my work for us to be able to work together so that I can help them grow that, and be able to hear their ancestors more, and even honestly engage with their baby more before their baby is even born. So much of this work in my field consists of protecting the baby spirits from threats, the carrying parents as well, but also the baby spirits in particular, from threats that threaten the baby's safety and birth rights, but also ensuring that they have the tools and resources that they need to be comforted and thriving in order to be conceived in the first place, if they want to do that, and then carried to the rest of the term if they want to do that. So I work with people who are striving to conceive, currently physically pregnant, and also spiritualists. So people who work with spirits already, who already know that they have some baby spirits nearby and they just want support with navigating that. In terms of duration, I often work with people from any duration. It's really just up to the person. I've worked with people who, like, they're not currently physically pregnant, but they have already known about having baby spirits around them, and they interact with these baby spirits on their own, but want support with that. And so, they're just like wanting to make sure the baby spirit is okay until it's time to give birth, or it's time to conceive in this current world. It's all types of things like that. But even thinking about postpartum, what this can look like, I make sure to tell my clients that that even once the baby is born, if that's something that's to happen, which it usually is, even when the baby is born, if you ever need anything, if the baby needs anything, just always keep me in mind as a resource. Especially because this is where my job starts to overlap, and become more similar to thinking about granny midwives, our hoodoo midwives, and how traditionally hoodoo midwives have been the medicine people, the cultural physicians in African American traditions. And my role is similar to that as well, because our support for a family can be lifelong. Like, it's not even just in relation to, okay, is this person pregnant, but also, how is the partner? Like, how is how is the baby? Like, what else is going on in your life? There's a lot more of a well-rounded experience, more of a communal experience as well. We acknowledge just all the different facets that could go into shaping your well-being, and shaping the different circumstances that you might experience. We understand that. And so, yeah, I usually work with people from any duration. It's always just up to the people. This service is available to Black people, with also some space made for non-Black people of color. That's at higher rates. So with Black birth givers, it's always listed that there are set rates, but it's more flexibility, bartering that's available, sliding scale if needed. I also do a lot of fundraising, which I'll talk about a little bit towards the end. But that is for Black birth givers. And then for non-Black birth givers of color, because it requires more work, it also, the rates are higher. That's like part of the reason, it's higher rates. And so that's how we practice this form of equity and just making sure our people are okay. So right here, you can just see a little bit of the services. Let me make sure this doesn't play. Okay, so you can see a little bit, just a snippet of some of the services. The different arsenals, as you heard before, are like a collection of monthly services. So, here you see different things about check-ins with the monthly check-ins with the unborn child or children, reporting back, the prescriptions. There are prescriptions that can come with that. And that's usually also with both the babies and the carrying parents' ancestors involved in that process. And just saying, like, okay, the baby needs to focus on this for this set time. The carrying parent or descendant also needs to be doing this. They don't need to be doing this during this time. These are what we're referring to as prescriptions. Sometimes that can be related to herbs. Sometimes it can be like, okay, they need to engage in this particular ceremony, all types of different things like that. We have, again, like ancestral relationship strengthening guidance. We have different emergency services, ceremonies. And then here at the bottom, you can see like the one-time a la carte arsenal. And this is where we can get into like more like one-time services like conjure-based support or hoodoo-based support for situations requiring access to harmful institutions, such as Western medical facilities, even like background checks for egg and sperm donor options for fertility treatments. So thinking about if you just want extra help with that, who are the ancestors of the person whose sperm you're trying to utilize, or the egg donors, like who you're trying to utilize? What is their lineage like? There's only so much that a Western medical facility can have on file. So what else do you want to know that would be helpful in terms of recognizing like the spiritual components of these services, of these things as well? So with prenatal spiritual security, this is explicitly not doula care, nor is it a midwifery practice. It's an esoteric form of birth work that focuses once again on the baby's security and is meant to reduce chances of them from straying away from their designated destiny. Though it can overlap at times, Unveiled Divine Technologies' prenatal spiritual security and care services do not inherently replace the need for doulas and midwives. And so I just want to emphasize that even though sometimes I will use the word care, most of the time you will hear me use prenatal spiritual security in particular. And it's emphasis on the security because the work is intense. Some of the ways that this can differ from what I mean when I'm saying it looks different from doulas and like midwifery, for example, is, in my practice, the baby is really the client. We work with the carrying parents, of course, because they're like the vessel for the baby, and we want to make sure that that's a safe experience for everyone involved. But also, there's a lot of direct contact that happens with the spirits of the unborn children to make sure that they're okay, to make sure that they're advocated for. Whatever thoughts, perspectives they're having is just like able to be echoed and not just like lost in the mix. So there's a lot around like the baby being the client for real. And then also another way of how this oftentimes differs is while Black birth work also being spiritual is nothing new because it's part of that Africanism going back again. While it being spiritual is nothing new, doula and midwife jobs most often don't inherently require shamanism in order to perform the job. And so that's always something that I love to bring up as well. All of these jobs are incredibly important, but we do have like some different ways that we vary. This right here, I'm not going to play it. I'm just showing it. This is a video that's on the Unveiled Divine Technologies channel. And essentially, it does provide an overview of all of these services in much greater detail. Okay, nope, don't play that. Hold on. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, so now we're getting into the question of what are the experiences of Black birth workers and their clients. So once again, we're talking about the commonalities and how our practices is in accordance to our indigenous roots how we perform in such a well-rounded way. You heard me mentioning before, sometimes hair braiding is a part of our part of our birth working traditions, cooking, or just providing certain recipes, things like that. We have different rituals that we will bring into the mix. We understand once again that it's not just some really narrow way of like, oh, we just go with you to whenever you're going to give birth, like the hospital. We support you only in that moment. We understand that there's a lot more that needs to go into that support, into like helping make sure that you have community ideally, and things like that. And so there's a lot more well-roundedness that goes in. Our support takes many shapes and forms. We can do a different thing every day or every meeting, and it's all contributing to the client's well-being and health. Other experiences of Black birth workers and our clients is just, again, having to navigate Western or Western influenced medical structures or Western influenced medical thought in particular. So even if we're not dealing with the institutions themselves, just thinking about Western influenced medical thought that really helped create those institutions, and so especially as a product of white supremacy, anti-Blackness, and the founding of this nation, this current nation. So yeah, having to deal with that is also one of our experiences, especially instead of like indigenous African medical thought, like which has a larger lens for us. It has a much larger lens. So there's a lot more knowledge there that's in alignment with everything else on earth. And that's not rooted in a whole bunch of violence. And even if we do share some similarities between like Western medical thought, we are just able to expand on it. And our indigenous heritages, we're just often able to like expand on it in a much greater way. And so these are some of our experiences. So other things is just having to mediate between anti-Blackness and Blackness in general, having to mediate between these. So before we talked about, having to navigate Western medical structures and medical thought as opposed to indigenous African medical thought, us being forced to navigate that is tied to this of having to mediate between anti-Blackness and Blackness. But the reason why it has its own separate slide is because of course it exists, these things exist outside of having to navigate medical institutions and medical thought in this current nation and in this current world. It exists outside of that when we have to deal with anti-Blackness and Blackness, even as birth workers, especially because we're not just in the hospitals, we're not just in places where people normally give birth or deal with medical, like their medical experiences. But so we're here defining anti-Blackness as, well, I'll define Blackness at first, actually. So we're going to define Blackness as thinking about life, protection of life, protection of Black energy, protection of Black life, just like the cycles of everything. We think about life and death, and we acknowledge that death is not something that should necessarily be demonized. In a lot of ACRs, African traditional religions, it's not something that is to be, scared of. It's not something that is supposed to be demonized. Where there is life, there is death. Where there is death, there is life. When we get to anti-Blackness, that is taking a step outside of that cycle, this very natural cycle, and being situated outside of that. We're talking about nothingness. We're talking about being situated in just this emptiness. And anti-Blackness is very dangerous to everybody, whether you're Black or not. But we just always, as Black birth workers and trying to protect our clients, trying to protect ourselves even, we're having to mediate between this anti-Black energy and Black energy on the day-to-day. There's also an article that I came out with at the end of 2020, and it's called When Birth Work and Warfare Mix, Black Birth Workers as Mediators Between Realms. The description says, while anti-Blackness and whiteness push for the eradication of the self, all soul, all heart, Black birth workers adamantly help us come into existence and stay in it. And here's a quote from it as well. Again, this article is actually on my website, taylormrlittle.com right here. This quote says, "My history and present of mediating between realms for babies occurs often, most specifically through shamanic technology, Other types of Black spirit-centering birth workers, specifically traditional birth doulas or midwives, may also have specialties, negotiating between different forces with herbs, tools, prayers, cloths, following their instinct, usually just their spirits leading them, etc. No matter what titles we may be using or inherit to describe it, Black birth workers are ancestrally serving as mediators through warding off enemy spirits away from delivery, from the womb, adding extra protections to the baby and or carrying parent. We are existing in babies mounting their birthing parent for pregnancy, fertility, and strength. We're being a friend, but also a security measure for the baby." So how can working with a birth worker serve as a complement to hospital medicine or care? That was a question that was given. And I love the fact that it was brought up, partially because I want to question it of, is that the goal? Birth workers complementing hospitals. Is that actually the goal? And so we can think again about like the more mainstream types of birth workers, thinking again about birth doulas and midwives. With birth doulas, their usual description is like, having to be an advocate for the parent and their care, the pregnant parent and their care, especially when it comes to medical institutions, not just, but especially in those types of environments. And then also, actually pause there, because when we're talking about like advocating, I love to bring this to that question too of, is that the goal, birth workers complementing hospitals? Because usually when you're hearing about it, it's like, well, why are you having to fight so hard? Like you're having to do all of this advocating, like for the pregnant parent and their baby. And why? Is because there's so much harm that's being caused in these institutions, because these institutions were founded on, anti-Black violence, especially against Black people with uteruses, but just really Black people as a whole as well. And so you're sensing all of that, like you're experiencing all of that energy and all of it rippling out, and then experiencing direct attacks as well. And that's not something that should actually be normalized, having to like, fight for your basic rights and having to, I just want to be really careful about the language that we use when we're talking about this, of how can working with the birth worker serve as a complement to hospital medicine or care? Is that really what's going on? Are they really, complementing hospital care, or are they really just the defense team that you're hiring because you have to enter this institution that is founded, on anti-Black violence? Um, Even when we talk about like midwives, usually there's more of an individualized care component or more of a care component as a whole. And some of you were talking about this in actually the very beginning in the chat when you were saying like, they're moving so quick, there's coldness, like these different feelings of just like, man, can I like get seen like for, my care, for my needs right now? Like, are you really gonna sit with me and like, show care towards me and understand what's going on, take the time? Y'all were mentioning this before. Oftentimes what you hear in the birth rate community, especially from our clients, people who have given birth, is this idea that, wow, like these midwives, like they spent so much more time. Like I've never had that much time, like getting medical care before. That's something that you actually commonly hear. And it's usually true. Even if midwives are super busy, you could be with the most busiest midwives on average, but it's still not going to be it's usually still not going to be as overwhelming, like their busyness, to the point that like average medical doctors and physicians are like dealing with, like in terms of just like the institutions that are also facilitating that. Like it's a different type of thing, it's a different type of feeling. And so and even like, and I love to bring this up too with talking about medical doctors and physicians and what they go through, because first of all, we live in a capitalist world as well, and so there's a lot of that energy that we were mentioning before of like, oh, it's coldness, it's just quick, quick, quick. How can you get the most out of this, but in the quickest way? We can't sit down and take our time and go through these things. There's not enough resources supporting us to get care, or if there are a lot of resources, it's not going towards the care. There's a lot of that goes on. And when we're stressed and overwhelmed with cases, whether you're a medical doctor, whether you're a public defender, whether you're whatever role that you're in, oftentimes within these institutions, it just becomes so much more likely to breeze over certain scenarios, to show up with less care. You might be burnt out. That's not okay. That system that's promoting that is actually not okay. And so I love to bring up, again, like thinking about the different birth workers that are in these spaces. Like it's just a very different experience when we're being brought into these spaces. For me, in terms of when I think about hospital medicine or hospital care, I think about how as Black birth workers, we are so necessary, but especially those who are working with Black spirits in particular. When I was saying before about this Africanism of being spirit led, in particular, Black spirit led, it's so important because oftentimes we're catching things that the doctors won't even catch. Why? Because we're able to work with, the ancestors of ourselves, the ancestors of the clients, even the baby, and to get a larger lens, essentially. I know for me, there was an experience that I had with the baby, and the pregnant client was nearing, their due date, like very close to it. And I remember that they had decided the pregnant client had decided that they were going to get, they wanted a labor induction. And I remember that that was their first time bringing it up to me. And I remember when they first brought it up, I was like, okay, I was like processing it. And I was like, okay, that's something, thank you for letting me know, that type of thing. But every time they kept bringing it up, there was something that was off. And I just couldn't name it. I couldn't figure it out, why it felt off. And then they talked about the appointment was very, very soon. And then that same day of the appointment, early that morning, I had totally forgot about it. Early that morning, I had a dream that their baby had gave like a delivery range. They gave like a date range of when they were saying they were gonna come, and it was starting on that day that I had woke up to like another time that week. And and it was so funny because it showed up like how on Amazon, it has like your package will arrive like from this time to this time. That's how like they had gave the date range. Like that's how it looked like in the formatting and everything. And you know, in my mind when I woke up, I was just like, you know, okay, like, you know, thank you, I'll tell your mama, like things like that. And I totally forgot the labor induction was that day. So I was like, okay, baby, I don't know how that's gonna work, but I hear you though. You know, you said you was gonna be born one of these days. And then their labor induction appointment, they were on their way to go in, and then they got a call that the hospital was just so busy. It was so busy. They were like, no, we have to reschedule. And I said, okay, I see what's going on. And then the next day, there was time for the appointment again. And they came, they went to the hospital this time. They finally did make it to the hospital. The mama was in a wheelchair, in the elevator. And as soon as they arrived to the floor that they were supposed to get on, her water broke, and that was it. The baby was like, I'm not doing that. The baby was like, I'm not doing that. They were not comfortable with that. And so, you know, baby spirits, it's really important to be able to advocate for them, because sometimes they just don't want certain things. But the thing is with that is because it goes back to recognizing them as spirits, in particular, because just how I was saying before, you know, it's important for Black birth workers to hone in on our indigeneity and maintaining our spiritual connection, things like that, working with spirits. Why? Because they have a greater eye. So even when I think back to that experience of like, you know, okay, why, you know, maybe why was the baby, you know, not wanting that labor induction? It could have been for so many reasons. Maybe the doctor they really didn't like, they didn't feel comfortable. Maybe the doctor or nurses was going to do something in particular that was going to mess something up in relation to their destiny or their spiritual like composition. You know, we don't know. But as soon as they say no, you don't really need to ask any other questions, you know? And so that's just one example that I think of when I think about, you know, prenatal spiritual security in relation to hospital medicine or care. There's also different examples of just oftentimes in my work, people's ancestors, if their descendants are choosing to give birth in a hospital or considering that as an option, a common thing that you'll see is people's ancestors giving really specific instructions, like developing certain birth plans. This is how if you're giving birth in a hospital, this is how you need to seal off this room, because you're not like, this is not really safe. We understand why you're here, but you know, we're going to try to make this as safe as possible, but no, this institution is not like for you, you know, but you do have rights. We need to let you know all these different things. They'll give different spiritual instructions for how to, you know, how to make sure it's tailored to the person who's giving birth. But yeah, to make sure that they're safe in that area. You know, they'll even maybe give tips on like, okay, tell that doctor to watch out for this. Tell that to pay attention to that, because otherwise they're not going to catch this. They'll give tips like that, and it's a really phenomenal experience. Another thing that comes up, especially within my lineage, is just the emphasis and reiteration that these colonial institutions, first of all, a hospital is a colonial institution, specifically in the current forms that we practice them, like in, you know, in the US, just in North America, but also just the West in general, and then also white influenced contexts. So that can be really anywhere nowadays. But so these colonial institutions, I remember the first time that my spirits had really started talking to, like, in detail about the spiritual components to these different medical institutions. They were talking about, you know, these institutions on this land right now, they were built to die. They were built with all of this death energy, which is so contrary because we think about going to them for medical care. So they were saying, you know, just to be aware of that, you know, make sure you have to be protected when you're going into these institutions as a Black person. And so with this question, again, how can working with a birth worker serve as a complement to hospital medicine or care? We're thinking less about, you know, becoming a complement to hospital medicine or care. More like the question, how can we strengthen our defenses if we have to be in that space and type of institution in the first place? Okay, so now we're going to one of the final slides. So then there's this question of what's important to know about Black birth workers and Black maternal health. So we are necessary, once again, because we live in a currently colonized world where accelerated and unjust death is a risk at all times. It is a risk at all times. Black birth workers are necessary to include as part of our defense teams. Not just like our cultural physicians, if they're qualified and have that titles according to our indigenous lineages and things like that, but especially as our defense teams. Where anti-Blackness wants us to die, Black birth workers want us to live and give us the tools and immediate resources for sustaining that. When it comes back to that question, again, of how are we relating to like hospitals and their care, we and hospitals, like we are not standing on equal footing. We are not standing on equal ground. We move most commonly being led by our indigeneity and callings to protect Black life and maintain reproductive peace. Hospitals in their current and historic form are not something that can be decolonized, similar to academic institutions. But we can protect our people who do have to engage with it while they are in there, because it's so understandable of why you might want to be there with certain technologies that, oftentimes we might not have access to in other places right now. So we can protect our people who do have to engage with it while they're in there, and also provide support and more life to the creations and infrastructures that will be built during and after their downfall. Finally, this is just spreading awareness about the Black Birth Givers Fund. This is a service this is a fund that is created or was created, for to make sure that Black birth givers who are interested in prenatal spiritual security services can continue getting heavily discounted services, if not fully free. And so if any of y'all would ever be interested in contributing to this fund, we are always looking for support for the fund for Unveil Divine Technologies as a whole, but for the fund in particular, that information can be found on the pay tab on taylorandmarylittle.com in particular. So thank you so much. And now we can hear from Destiny.
Hey everybody, I'm Destiny Price. Pronouns are they, them. And I'm gonna just be sharing a little bit about why I chose services with Tay, and my experiences with Tay. So if we can go to the next slide. So a lot of the reason why I chose services with Tay was because of my comfortability with healthcare systems and the access to those. So I've never been comfortable with healthcare settings. So when it came to my pregnancy, I held the most anxiety around my care and my unborn baby's care. I had already struggled with finding a Black doctor for when I did rely on Western medicine for care, or when it was the only thing available to me at the time. When I found out I was expecting, everything had been moving fast in my life at that time that I had not thought about what care could look like during the duration of my pregnancy. At the time, my needs more so aligned with spiritual nutrition rather than the physical. I had not felt safe, and the spiritual turmoil that I had undergone had started to affect my physical body. I had searched for a doula the first 2 months of my pregnancy, which involved a lot of research, and with costs being so high and the availability of a doula at the time, it just hadn't aligned with my needs. As a first-time parent, I had not known exactly what I may need to sustain a healthy pregnancy and balance support, but many of the things I was presented within searching for a doula seemed doable on my own at the time. As Black individual, I needed more assurance that I would be safe giving birth in a hospital, as that was the option accessible to me at the time. So connecting with Tay happened in a very organic way. And then as I looked at who she was in relation to Black birthing bodies and baby spirits, I knew that her services aligned with my needs. I remember how seen I felt the first time I did a check-in with Tay. It felt very affirming to know that although I had never had any experience like this, I was comfortable with the medicine I was learning about, the work that was being prescribed to my unborn baby and myself, and Tay's presence altogether. I had not felt like I needed to protect myself, my identities, and the true nature of what my body and spirit had been experiencing. That was one of the many reasons why I was always hesitant to going into healthcare settings or hospitals for emergencies, or things that I was just feeling in my body that I could not explain, that I knew that if I explained it in a way that was most comfortable to myself, to a doctor, I just always had the fear that that would be used against me, or and I just wouldn't be safe sharing that knowledge or just that experience. So I never in my time working with Tay felt like I had to hide who I was and how I show up in the world as a Black queer person. One of the many services Tay provides are baby check-ins. And I gain a lot of insight about my baby spirit through these check-ins, which gave me a lot of relief as I gain more information and skills to better practice safeguarding myself and my body, as well as my babies. Um, in the beginning, during my first trimester, I was very, very sick. There were certain things happening, like fainting, that I really couldn't explain. Every time I had went into the doctors, I was told like the same thing over and over again. So it became apparent to me that I wasn't being heard, or the pain that I was experiencing wasn't being taken seriously. Um, so being able to receive services like baby check-ins with Tay, just reassured me that I was doing the right things. There were just other things happening on the other end. So it was more so just very affirming to know that what I was experiencing wasn't just in my head, um, and that I could still gain support. So I worked with Tay from May of 2021 to the day I gave birth in November of 2021. During this time, I learned a lot about rituals and processes that were catered to my ancestors and deepened my familial and ancestral relationships. It was very reassuring to know that some of the physical issues and spiritual issues I was dealing with lied within those relationships and inside my own body. Tay's communication of these relationships that I had been strengthening and learning from, as well as her communication to my baby spirit, provided solutions to issues that I could not get answers for in a doctor's office, nor would feel safe to speak on. Tay made herself available to me very consistently in a virtual capacity most of the time, and always had an option of in-person meetings. Due to the nature of his work, a lot of this work could get accomplished through video chats and phone calls that still sustain comfortable. And Tay was very flexible with me in terms of how I received services from her when we would work together and funding the services. So I know Tay mentioned there being large funds and ways to fund um, persons that are birthing babies. So that was one of yeah, just one of the ways that it was very helpful and accessible to me, especially because I couldn't financially cover a doula or any extra care that could kind of like mediate the experiences that I was having, the personal experiences that I was having with going into a doctor's office or a hospital. My experiences were very far from a transactional relationship or an approach that hinders my voice to be heard and identities to be met in an affirmative, equitable manner. During my work with Tay, I also received DreamWork services. This intentional work did a lot of protective nurturing for myself and my baby. I was able to better equip myself with knowledge and skills to grow my relationship with my baby even before she was born, Earthside. When there were very heavy prescriptions involved or things that were hard to hear about in regards to the harm and anti-Blackness my baby's spirit um, had been experiencing in my own spirit, Tay had a beautiful way of being transparent with me and naming the ways in which she would be of support to us. Um, it was very reassuring to hear and just know that somebody that reflected my experiences in a way could just affirm and be there and hear what I've been going through. Um, and just to also be very affirming in the ways that I have been practicing my own safeguarding for myself. This was something I held on to a lot during my pregnancy that deepened into fellowship with Tay, something that I have never experienced in a doctor's office. As my baby's due date came up, Tay worked with me diligently and gently to support myself and my baby in having a safe, protected birth in the hospital. Tay became more available virtually and even was able to come visit and work with me for 2 days. This memory is my most fondest of my time with Tay so far. She was there to support me in ritual, she cooked for us, we shared space intently, and quite honestly kicked it. I felt very taken care of and heard as it got closer to my due date. I was very nervous about what I would experience in a hospital setting, and Tay was available to me virtually at every time from the start of being admitted into the hospital to the moment I held my baby. So initially, when I had got into the hospital and prior to that, I had been able to keep communicating with Tay and just keeping her updated in what was going on. And that felt good enough. Prior, I had always carried the fear during my whole pregnancy that I would be by myself, especially because of COVID at the time and just different protocols in hospitals. So I didn't have too much confidence in like a support system, but as I was working with Tay, Tay worked with was able to help me and support me and just creating a birth plan for myself, so I felt safe and was able to bring in the things that I know and that Tay prescribed and communicated on my ancestors' behalf of what would protect me physically in that space, in that setting, and um, to ensure that my baby made it safely earthside. So that was something I really appreciated and something that I didn't think would feel comfortable in a virtual setting, but just because of the relationship and the ways that Tay um, provides her services during that whole time, that whole duration, it just made it feel like she was actually there in the room with me when I gave birth, and I think that's an awesome feeling to feel, especially in this time of COVID and a pandemic. So, yeah, that was very appreciated. So now just to talk a little bit about what that care looks like now, um, that I've given birth. So my experience with Tay after giving birth has been very nourishing. Tay has been very great about checking in still, especially during the first 2 weeks of having my baby Earthside. She was here as I was navigating sickness, breastfeeding, and spiritual upkeeping. She communicates with me anytime my spirits and hers have something to communicate to me in regards to this work. This space of new parenthood and holding all of the knowledge I have gained during my experience with Tay has been nourishing because it has grounded me in the fact that my body holds medicine, my family holds medicine, and my community holds medicine. This medicine doesn't always come in the form of physical medicine like pills, vitamins, and things like that, but sometimes, especially for Black communities, it lies within our tongue, our stories, our food, our bodies, and our history. The way in which Tay's work directly translates this medicine has not only provided a safe space for securing and protecting Blackness, but also has provided me with ways to stay in tune with my spirit and ancestry in relation to my health, which has been very important for me. I don't think I've ever had such a tangible way of accessing knowledge and accessing what lies within like my lineages and like history and my ancestry. So I think that this whole experience has definitely solidified, um, yeah, the fact that folks should be confident in relying on the medicine that they've been given since the day we've been born, the things that yeah, that doctors can't really communicate it or explain that we know that works for ourselves and works for our bodies and works for our peoples. So that overall has been my experience with Tay in this work. And Tay, still to this day, is very accessible and just it's very, um, yeah, easy to communicate with her. I can just text her or like call whenever I have a question. And she's been very good about communicating capacity and what it looks like to continue services, with navigating her website, and things like that, and what work could look like, from now on, as my baby continues to grow. So, we could go to the next slide. I'm going to transition into talking about a little bit about what this has looked like for me, just balancing Western medicine and community medicine. So for me, I just only go when I really need to go, to the hospital or doctor offices. And my experience with Tay has really, grounded me in the fact that I just, I kind of just know when I need to go to a hospital or when I don't. And now I have confidence in like other options and accessing other options. I think it's very important to know the things that are more accessible to us and thinking about, how other things should be accessible. So I think because Western medicine isn't always accessible, it's expensive. It's expensive not only, financially, but like it's emotionally exhaustive. It's spiritually harmful. So before I ever go into hospitals and healthcare offices, I ground myself in what I know and what my people know prior to going into colonized spaces like those. And all experiences aren't the same, of course, because of, um, how we show up and navigate the world. But, for me as a Black queer individual, I know that those experiences for me have mostly been harmful, minimized, uh, and just exhaustive. So I always make sure to, protect my people's knowledge and the medicine that I have in community, protect my identity, and, yeah, it just overall, the experience of working with a Black birth worker has, definitely taught me a lot. It has taught me a lot about myself. It's taught me a lot about my community. It has taught me a lot about hospitals, even though I'm not learning directly from, the like our country's, um, healthcare system. So, um, yeah, that is my portion of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening to my narrative, and to my experience.
Thank you so much, both to you, Destiny and Tay. We really appreciate you coming on and taking the time and to talk about this. It's really insightful in hearing from you. And so I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to begin the Q&A session of this presentation. Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you
let
all
me
again
stop
for
sharing.
that wonderful presentation. Um, we had one question so far in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or use the Q&A portion. If you cannot find the Q&A portion, you can put it in the chat. I'm monitoring both. Tay, I did have a question for you. How can we use inclusive language without boiling a person down to their reproductive organs and see each of us as a whole person?
I think that's a great question. I think also it can start with just asking people directly, like if you're able to do that, like, well, how do you want to be referred to? Like when we're talking about this, like even when we're talking about like breastfeeding, some people prefer terms like chest feeding. So just like exploring different language, um, you know, understanding that there are different options to talk about things. It doesn't have to be this one set like defaults, and just yeah, asking how people feel. Like even if they haven't been exposed to this language before, okay, well, it's okay. Like when you hear that, do you feel uncomfortable? Do your body tighten up? Do you feel like, oh, that's the one. That's the one I want to use. For me, I want to use birthing person or birth giver or yeah, or just like I feel comfortable with just being like, oh, I'm a pregnant woman or I'm a pregnant person, depending on how they identify. Yeah, just being able to talk with others, and it's really not uh hard as I know a lot of transphobic people make it seem to like switch our language, you know, we can also practice. It's also great to practice. You know, practice using gender neutral language. And it's so important to do so in when we're talking about reproductive health and reproductive justice. Especially especially if we are talking about taking anti-colonial stances in relation to bodies and our genders, because we know that the same genders that were forced on us, you know, by colonialism, by white colonialism, by Arab colonialism, is not what it always was. And those are very, very different. Our indigenous ways of practicing gender is very different. So we also want to just pay respects to that as well, and just be mindful of like kind of like where we're starting from when we're also using this language.
Thank you. While we're waiting on questions to come in, um, I know Destiny has stated some of this, but I wanted to just ask you this question. What has it been like to support Black women in their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum during COVID-19?
Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yes, the question is, what has it been like to support Black women in their pregnancy, birth, and postpartum during COVID-19?
I think it's been really wholesome. I think it's really wholesome. There's usually so much like love and compassion, especially because I know that in my experience, the people who tend to find me most of the time, the people who tend to find me, whether it's for birth keeping work or whether it's for any of my other services under Unveiled Divine Technologies, usually there's some type of agreement that's been made beforehand by my spirits and that person's spirits. And so it's really it tends to be a more orchestrated way, or a more orchestrated type of meeting. Where I'm just here and then y'all are brought to me. And then I'm like, oh, I see why you were brought to me. That make a lot of sense. This is very nice. And then I provide support. So and I think it's definitely been like that for my birth keeping clients. Like there's just so much laughter that tends to be involved in that process. Like in those relationships, there's just a lot of love. It's really good. And you know, during a pandemic in particular, where, you know, I know it was mentioned like how much emphasis can be on like virtual support versus being able to show up in person all the time. It's like even that is still manageable. Like uh I make sure to like follow up on like, you know, how you're feeling, you know, in relation to this. Is this enough for you? Things like that. Do you want me to show up? Because I will, you know. And so I also travel for my work as well. And even then, even if I do have to like travel for you know, birth keeping work, especially if it's out of state, then there's certain protocols that we have that we go through to make sure that like the spiritual hygiene is still there, physical hygiene is still there, but especially that spiritual piece, so that, you know, if I just have to take a plane to get here, then of course we're doing certain things like wearing masks, but also, you know, we're gonna do like the different cleansings that we have to do to make sure that we're just protecting each other, you know, in this space. All of that is, you know, is very manageable. And so we find our ways to make things work, because that's just what Black people have always done.
Thank you. We have another question. Um, my apologies, as you may have mentioned, in terms of spirits and religion, is your study multicultural, or do you study a group of faith-based support?
I think I want to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. Is there another way that you could phrase it when you're
Um,
talking about study part?
so I asked it like this because it's in the chat. So we'll start with
Yeah.
this way. Do you study a group of faith-based support? I think they're trying to understand just a little bit more because it starts off mentioned in terms of spirits and religion. Is your study
Hmm.
multicultural, or do you study a group of faith-based support? So I guess that's the question. Like, do you study a group of faith-based support?
Like, do I work with people who are? Oh, do you follow on faith? Okay, there you go. Okay. It was the study part and the group part that was messing me up. Okay. Do you follow one faith? So for me, my services are primarily rooted in Hoodoo and Islam. Hoodoo is the oldest, first distinct, traditionally African American religion of the U.S. It is a culmination of the different heritages, a lot of the different heritages that we brought with us as we were forced upon this land. So that is oftentimes a religion of, we can see different Akan practices, Senegambian practices, Congo things, like all in this one religion. We have a core of what that looks like, and then it also shifts depending on our region. So I practice Hoodoo, and that is in respect to my lineages. And then also I practice Islam. My spirits are heavily Muslim, and so I would not be the religious Black Muslim that I am today if not for those Black Muslim ancestors who were also primarily diviners and preserving their indigenous traditions along the way as well. They also have influenced me a lot as well. So I work with Hoodoo and Islam, and then also because of the certain lineages that I have, sometimes or oftentimes there will be other categories of spirits and creatures and other beings, even deities that I will be led to have relationships with and sustain those relationships with, to make sure that all needs are being met, all of my lineages are being supported and things like that. And then that also helps me support other people as well. And also research and history is something that's always very present in my work, whether it's our spirits teaching me about different things, or whether it's me taking it upon myself to study different readings, things like that. And then my spirits will help me vet the information, make sure that it's actually accurate, because there's a lot that's gate kept by academia, or white kept by academia, things like that. But it's kind of like half done, or just wrong. And so oftentimes our spirits involved, the Black spirits involved, will help me make sure that I'm understanding everything in a way that's actually accurate and reflective of what's going on. So hopefully that answers what your question was.
Yes, that was very helpful from the chat. This is a two-part question, so we'll start off with the first one and then we'll go to the next one. So the first question is, how did you get involved in birth work?
That's a really big question. I'm gonna try to simplify it. So I got into birth work, a couple of years ago, and it was so I've worked with spirits for a while. I've worked with spirits since before I became into birth work. That was something oftentimes what you see in these communities and ATRs and Black spiritualist traditions is our destinies find us. It's not always a matter of, oh yeah, I like that, I'm gonna choose this right here. It's not always like that, and birth work was definitely that case for me. I had never really seen myself in the birth work community. It seemed cool, I just didn't really feel calls. But one summer there was some back-to-back experiences that started happening in a very condensed way, where other spiritualists who, so those are people who work with spirits again, these people knew about their different baby spirits, and they started needing emergency services, emergency support, and they knew to come to me for that support. And I would be surprised a little bit, because I'd be like, I don't know, can I do that? What do you need help with? Different things like that. It was very back to back, and it was something that didn't cease until I had acknowledged explicitly that, okay, I was accepting this role. And so that's something that you actually see. That's something that you actually see pretty commonly in our African birthworking traditions. No matter where you are in the diaspora, or if you're on the continent itself, where there's a calling that happens. There was also a period where I got sick, and so it ceased for a while. So those emergency callings, the emergency support that other people needed, that had ceased after I was like, okay, I accept the role, things like that. Then a couple months later, then I got sick, really, really sick. I thought I was gone. And then, we divined on it. Then it turns out I just needed to perform this very specific ceremony that was also in relation to why I'm able to do the work in the way that I am to do. And then as soon as I performed that ceremony while I was still sick, next morning I was fine. I was all good. And so that's actually common. sickness, finding out through dreams, finding out from elders that we have in the community who are also experts in these certain healing traditions. Those are all really common markings of coming into African birthwork practices, whether we call it that or not.
And the second part of that question is, how do you support your self-care?
Okay. Also, really quick, I want to make sure that I go back really quick to that question. I just want to say you could read more about my experience and also just other experiences of Black birth workers, again, in that When Birthwork and Warfare Mix article. I just wanted to say that before I forgot, and that's on taylor@marilittle.com. In terms of my self-care and supporting myself, I would say, well, for me, I love to laugh. So I am, I like to my friends. I like to watch things that are that feel light, that feel funny. And I like to. I also, I try to listen to my spirits as best as I can, just to make sure that if there's something that I need to be like letting go of, for example, I need to be bringing in more of that. Um, yeah, just to make sure that I'm protecting my health. I'm also a very particular person, and I'm also a homebody. So one thing about me is that I'm gonna love staying at home. And so this really, it's always great to be in a place that I've tended to personally, that I've decorated, where my spirits are housed as well. That's always something that does bring me comfort. Spending time with my family, those are all ways that that I practice self-care, just by bringing that type of love and protection to myself and also my community here in Detroit, Michigan. Love y'all, because they are just, I'm so fortunate to have them. One of them is on this call right now, Dee Dee, and I know that Dee Dee constantly is acknowledging that we are a village, and it's really true. The Black, queer, and trans people here in the city of Detroit, Michigan are unmatched.
Thank you. And I have another question for you. In your spiritual work, have you had clients who came to you for a spiritual consultation who it turned out needed medical intervention?
So let me see. So I think that not necessarily during a consultation. So here's how I took that question. So usually before we actually start working together, there's a consultation that happens in the beginning to actually see if we're a good fit for one another. And so during that consultation process, where we're going over like the different guidelines, things like that, sharing more about what you need, what you're feeling, and also same here, you know, usually there's nothing that comes up around medical intervention, like needing that per se in that context. But in terms of like a little bit later on, there could be moments where in those monthly collections of services, those arsenals that was being described before, certain spirits, usually of the descendants, might point out like, okay, they do need attention to this, or they need to watch out for this. There is a lot of like medical overlap that comes up, but not but when I say medical overlap that comes up, I'm just pertaining to like the health of the physical body. I'm not pertaining to like, oh, you're legally obligated to go to the hospital now, or like you're legally obligated to go to the doctor. But sometimes ancestors do say, okay, you should go to the doctor, but specifically to check this thing out. It's okay if you don't have to go there for everything, but you go for this specific issue. So the benefit of that is that, again, we're being able to be affirmed, but also we're able to get specific instructions to preserve ourselves and to protect ourselves, so that we're not just entering these environments looking wild and like potentially being taken advantage of. We're going in with a very pointed like mindset, because we're already informed. My spirit said I need to check this out. Y'all are accessible to help me with this particular issue. I'm here for this issue. And so that's when something maybe around like medical intervention might come up. But most of the time, when it comes to managing like physical health of the body, there are ways that we can definitely like support that without it having to go that far to going to an institution. And that's the benefit, a huge benefit of just working with our lineages, because they know our bodies the best. They had them.
We had another question for you. For hospital births, are you typically present at the hospital during the birth? If so, what have been your experiences by the medical community by being a part of the support system for the birth?
So far, all of the births that I have been able to support have actually been through virtual. And the reason why has been through COVID protocols and people so like COVID protocols in hospital settings in particular. And what was I going to say? And with that as well, oh yeah, so we would have conversations around like, like do you want me there? Like different things like that. I always check in, like how do you want me to be in relation to your birth time? When it's time for that. And usually like the answer is would love to have you there, but usually because of those protocols being in place, they're only able to bring like one person in, and that's usually like they might bring like a spouse, which is totally understandable, or like their mom or like a different parent. And so, that's always understandable. The thing is, the really great thing about my work about prenatal spiritual security and also just being a conjure woman, period, is that with the type of work that I do, it's really not necessary for me to be there physically because we're working with spirits, and I have certain spirit teams like that are under me, working for me, as well as spirits overseeing me, and they have spirits working with them too, and we're able to just do all of this communication with one another, strategizing, planning beforehand, and even during the actual time of them giving birth. There's a lot that we can actually do. There's actually a lot of flexibility that can happen to make sure that they continue to have a good birthing experience. And usually I'm on call during that entire time. If they need anything, like if the person giving birth does need anything, and I also provide updates of like, okay, this is what our spirits are talking about, or witnessing. This is what the baby spirit is feeling at this time. Like, how is that showing up for you? Like, while you're over there, are you okay? So there's all of these different communications that can happen, that actually make it a really, it's a great experience. It's a fine experience. And so I'm very fortunate about that. Most of the times when I've had to travel have been for like different ceremonies that are still relevant to like the birthing experience, like the pregnancy experience and things like that. And then I see the question here in the chat as well around, oh, I'm sorry, wait, if so, what have your experiences been by the medical community? Yeah, I guess that's still answered by the question, or by my answer of like, I haven't really had that many incidences where I've had to bring up being a conjure woman to like my client's medical facility that they're at. There's usually not instances where I've had to have done that. Let me see. But if there might be certain things that I might say to like my clients where I'm like, okay, you can give this to the doctor, or like you can say this, like phrase it this way to the doctor, so that way they're not like, you know, treating you like negatively just because of, you needing this prescription as well, like this spiritual prescription as well, you having to follow through these certain restrictions or guidelines outside of this institution, things like that. So there might be like guidance in that way too.
And I have another question for you. Are you compensated by any insurance companies, or your services private pay?
So they are private pay, and they are private pay, and it would be really great if, we could do something with, the insurance companies. It will probably be a bit difficult because oftentimes, indigenous systems of, management, health management are not really respected until they're like whitewashed, and, white people are able to like profit off of them in a great way, like in a like extensive way. But and that's pretty hard to do when my work is the way that it is. But would be great if that could happen. And so it tends to be pretty private, and that's also one of the reasons why we raise money. We raise money to make sure that, if you can't afford it, or if you feel like paying for this service, if we've already agreed that this service will be a great fit for you, and you happen to not be able to afford it, we should not let that stop you. Like, okay, then we're gonna find the money, no problem. We're gonna find the money, somebody got it. And so we're gonna make it happen. And so that's why we're always trying to raise money so that Black people can get their needs met. We really want to make sure that Black people can get their needs met. That should not be a concern.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. This next question is for Destiny. Um, Jay had put a thank you for sharing your experience and your spiritual navigation. And I'm just summarizing this for time's sake. And if we get down to the last part of the question, it asks, how has your experience been navigating the day to day and being in relationship with your baby presently?
Thank you for that question, Jay. That's actually a really great question I've been sitting on recently, thinking about. Um, from my day to day, just from starting with the mostly spiritual relationship to now navigating um, like the present right now. Um, so with the baby check-ins and things that happened with Tay, um, uh, I'm sorry, I'm just reading this message in the chat. I Edward, should I go ahead and read the rest of the question asked?
Um, I can read it for you. The
Okay.
message states, thank you so much, Destiny, for sharing your experiences with spiritual navigation, your pregnancy and postpartum experience. It was lovely to hear that you received the support you needed and wanted, along with having your feelings affirmed about your experiences. Also, deeply sorry for the encounters of dismissals from non-Black beings in the medical system. It's comfortable with sharing. How has your experience been navigating the day to day and being in relationship with your baby presently? And I'm sorry for summarizing that.
No worries. Thank you, Edward, for reading the rest of that. Yeah, so just to continue what I was saying, with the knowledge and things that had happened up until my baby was born earthside, which there was a change with baby spirits, but I won't dig too much into that information. But that has emotionally just been a little tender to navigate in this time now that I physically have my baby here. Um, so it's been hard because I'm physically and literally busy and just learning parenting, as it's only been just about 5 months with my baby. So sustaining the spiritual relationships that I had been strengthening during that time for right now has looked, of course, I've been putting in less time because I had more time and capacity for it before. But even though it's still needed right now in this moment and during this time of having my baby physically here, it's just harder to kind of do. So I am navigating and finding different ways to do that, if that makes sense. Um, and then also it is also has just been difficult because yeah, the transition is kind of a little shaky just because you're told a bunch of things when you're in the hospital, and so I'm still scrambling like, okay, do I need to take my baby immediately to a check-in? How do I feel about my baby receiving services at this hospital? So it seemed like I didn't really have enough time to really think about those things. But again, I feel more confident and strengthened in my ability to protect myself and my baby spiritually in those spaces. Although, yeah, I haven't really had enough time to really think about what the future looks like for me and my baby going within those um, medical institutions and receiving like Western medicinal care. So, um, yeah, thank you for asking that question again.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for just being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with us today. And I just want to say thank you all again for that wonderful presentation. We're almost at the end of our scheduled time, and we still have a few things to cover. So again, I just want to say thank you all again for that wonderful presentation and bringing awareness to Black health workers. Thank you. We would now like to ask everyone to complete the evaluation survey for today's webinar at the link provided on the screen. The survey will open automatically once the session has ended, and the link has also been put into the chat. If you would like to receive your certificate for continuing education credit, you will have the opportunity to download it at the end of the survey. Even if you do not want the CE credit, we ask that you fill out the survey to give us valuable information about our webinars. Today's session was recorded and will be viewable online within the next week. Please check our YouTube channel for the video link. Please visit us online at nnlm.gov to learn about upcoming programs and membership opportunities, and to learn about training, funding, and resources available from the NNLM. Next slide, please. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you at the next webinar.